All right, my secondary math 1 class. We are going to be starting a new unit and actually a new type of math. So we're moving into what's called geometry and even a little bit of trigonometry. So we are going to be talking about triangles and specifically right triangles today. Okay, so the one important note we need to make on our notes is that every single triangle, no matter what it looks like, so I'm just going to draw a very generic triangle. Okay, no matter what it looks like, all of the angles, so let's make this note on our paper. All angles add to equal 180 degrees. Okay, no matter what type of triangle it is, all three of their angles will add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so we see that there are always 3 angles in a triangle. Okay, 3 sides, 3 angles. Okay, no matter what degrees these angles are, all 3 of them are going to add up to 180 degrees. Okay, awesome. So knowing that every single triangle has to add up to 180 degrees, that means we can find a missing angle. So we see in numbers 1, 2, and 3, there are these question marks. Okay, we can find that missing angle based on knowing that all of these angles equal 180. Okay, so how we're going to do that is we're going to take the total number of degrees, which is 180, right? So for number 1. And we are going to subtract the 2 angles that it gives us. Okay, so we have our total degrees, which is 180. That'll be all 3 of these angles. And if we subtract both of the angles that it gives us, we'll be able to find that missing angle. Okay, so first I'm going to subtract, 135. Okay, then I'm going to subtract 20. It does not matter which order you subtract them in, as long as you subtract them from 180. You must start with 180. Okay, so we can just go ahead and put this in our calculator. 180 minus 135 minus 20. Okay, so knowing that we have to have 180, if we subtract the 2 angles it gives us, it'll give us that third angle, which is 25. Okay, and we're always going to label these as degrees. Okay, so we know that 25 degrees is that angle right there. Okay, and if you wanted to double check your work, you could even say, okay, well, let's double check. Does 20 plus 135 plus the 25 that we found, does it equal 180? We're just double checking our work here. 20 plus 135 plus 25. And yes, it does equal 180. So we are good. Okay, so let's do that again for number 2. Okay, so it gives us 2 angles. Knowing the 2 angles that it gives us, we can find the third angle. Okay, so we always start with our total number of degrees, which is 180. So I have 180, and I'm going to subtract the 2 degrees that it gives us. So 75 and 50. Okay, and we're going to see what we get. Total degrees, subtracting the 2 angles that it gives us, will give us our third angle. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this in our calculator. 180 minus 75 minus 50. Okay, and I know my third angle should be 55 degrees. Okay, so that third angle is that missing angle right there, 55 degrees. Okay, well, let's go ahead and double check our work, just to be clear. Okay, we know that all 3 of these angles have to add to equal 180. So first, let's take 50 plus 75, so the 2 angles it gives us. And now let's add the 55 that we found. Does it equal 180? Let's check in our calculator. 50 plus 75 plus 55 equals 180. So we know we are good. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so let's do that one more time on number 3. So it gives us two angles, 35 and 65. Knowing these two angles it gives us, we can subtract them from our total, which is 180. Okay, so we always start with our total, that's 180. Subtract 35, subtract 65, and let's see what that gives us. So now I have 180 minus 35 minus 65, and that'll give us our third degree, which is 80. Okay, so I know that that third missing angle is equal to 80 degrees. Okay, so now let's just double check our work really quick. So all three of these guys should equal 180, so let's check. 35 plus 65 plus 80. Okay, so let's check in our calculator. 35 plus 65 plus 80. And that does equal 180. Check. Beautiful. Okay. So now, looking at problems 4, 5, and 6. So we have missing angles, okay? But in these missing angles, notice that we actually have an equation in there, okay? It's not just a question mark anymore, okay? But I just want us to label it as a question mark for now, okay? So we're gonna label the angle with the equation in it, or the variable. We're just gonna put a question mark in there, and we're just gonna treat it just like there's no equation, okay? Just like our last problems where we have two angles given, and we're gonna find that third angle, okay? So I have two angles that it gives me, and I'm gonna try and find this third angle. Okay, so remember, we take it away from our total, 180 minus 67 minus 60. So what is that third angle, that question mark, going to be? Okay, so we got 180 minus 67 minus 60 equals 53. Okay, so we know that that angle right there is 53. Okay, but that's not what it's asking for. Okay, notice in our directions that it's not asking us to find the missing angle, it's asking us to solve for x. Okay, so we're trying to figure out what is x here. Okay, so this is where we're going to take this equation that it gives us, so 5x plus 8, and set it equal to what we found, 53. Because that's the angle that we found was right there. Okay, so now we can go ahead and solve for x. Okay, so I'm just looking at this side of my equal sign because that has my x on it. I have to get rid of this plus 8 first because it's farthest away. So what is the opposite of plus 8? We're going to subtract 8 from both sides of my equal sign. I get 5x equals 53 minus 8 is 45. Okay, and my very last step to get x by itself, what is the opposite of times by 5? We're going to divide by 5. Okay, so I know that for number 4, x is equal to 45 divided by 5, which if you don't know this off the top of your head, you can put a calculator. So we get x is equal to 9. And there we go. Okay, let's do the same thing for number 5. So first let's identify the two angles that it actually gives us. Okay, the degrees that we know. So we know 46 degrees and we know 82 degrees. Okay, so we need to figure out that third degree. Remember, we're just gonna replace that with a question mark, just like on numbers 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we're gonna take our total number of degrees in a triangle, which is 180, subtract the two angles that it gives us, 82 minus 46, and what is that third angle going to be? Okay, so I get 180 minus 82 minus 46, and I get 52. So I know that 52 is my missing angle, or the angle with my x in it. But remember, that's not our answer. That's just going to help us find our answer. Okay, so now we're going to set our equation, which is just an easy peasy 13x equal to what we found, 52. Okay, now there's only one step to get my x by itself. So what is the opposite of times by 13? We're going to divide by 13 on both sides. Okay, so my x is now all by itself. What is 52 divided by 13? We get 4. So for number 5, x is equal to 4. Beautiful. Okay, let's do number 6. Okay, so it gives us two angles. Okay, but what is this angle that's labeled like this? Okay, that equals 90 degrees. So whenever you see that little box, we know that that's actually 90 degrees. Okay, awesome. So it gives us the two angles. We're trying to find the third angle, or the angle with our x in it. Okay, so we're going to take our total number of degrees, which is 180, subtract the two angles that it gives us, 60 minus 90, and we're going to figure out what our missing angle is. Okay, so 180 minus 60 minus 90, and we get 30. Okay, so we know that that 30 is where that third angle is. Okay, so we're going to take this 3x in order to solve for x and set it equal to what we found, 30. Okay, now easy peasy. There's only one thing we got to do to get x by itself. What is the opposite of times by 3? We're going to divide by 3. So I get x is equal to 30 divided by 3 is 10. So x equals 10. Beautiful. Okay. Now for numbers 7 and 8. Notice it's asking us now to find the missing side. Okay, we're not talking about angles anymore. Angles are on the inside. The sides are the sides of the triangle. Okay, so notice it doesn't really give us the angles except for one, which is, what does that little box mean? Okay, it means 90 degrees. Okay, that's what's going to help us in our what's called the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so let's make this super important note on our paper. Down here, Pythagorean, I'm just going to abbreviate it, theorem. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem allows us to find a missing side of a right triangle when given two sides. Okay, so this Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, now you're going to say, well, what in the world, a, b, and c? What is a, b, and c? Okay, well, let's look back at our right triangle. In fact, let's draw a right triangle. This will make a good note. Okay, so we're going to draw a right triangle right here. Okay, so a right triangle means that there's a little right angle right there. Okay, so the sides that make this right angle, those are called our legs. Okay, so that's a leg and that's a leg. Okay, the side that is straight across from our right angle, this is called the hypotenuse. Okay, well, that's really going to help us because legs can either be A or B. It actually doesn't matter. We can label this guy A, that guy B. We could have switched it, doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that C is always the hypotenuse. So C is always right across from your right angle. Okay, so knowing this, let's go ahead and label on number 7, what is our A, B, and C? So first of all, find your right angle. Across from it is our C. So I know that X is actually going to be C. Okay, well remember the legs, they can be A or B. So we can label 6 as A, 8 as B. Doesn't really matter. Okay, well now knowing these, that 6 is A, 8 is B, we can plug those into our Pythagorean theorem to solve for C, or our missing side. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So now I have 6 squared. Okay, remember it's always squared. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So A squared is 6, so 6 squared, plus B, 8 squared, equals C, which is X squared. And we've now filled in the Pythagorean theorem with the sides we know in order to find our missing side. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to simplify what is 6 squared. Remember, it's either 6 times 6 or there's a little squared button. 6 squared is 36. Okay, so we're just going to change that 6 squared to a 36. Okay, now what is 8 squared? What is 8 times 8? Or 8 squared? We get 64. Okay, we cannot figure out what x squared is because we don't know what x is, so it has to stay x squared. Okay, well now we can simplify 36 plus 64. What is 36 plus 64? Okay, if you want to use a calculator, we get 100 equals x squared. Okay, and this is where you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I got my x is all by itself, but is x all by itself? No, we got to get rid of this squared. What is the opposite of squared? Just like addition is the opposite of subtraction, multiplication is the opposite of division, we know that a square root is the opposite of squared. They cancel each other out. Okay, got to do the same thing to both sides. So now we get our x. But what is the square root of 100? Okay, so we have this button on our calculator. It's right above the x squared. So I'm going to click second, x squared. Okay, that's going to give me my square root. Type in 100, and I get 10. So I know that this missing side is 10 on my triangle. So we can find a third side of a right triangle using the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so let's try that again on number 8. Okay, so first thing we want to do is identify our A and our B and our C. Okay, well we know that C always has to be across from my hypotenuse. Okay, so this time 5 is our hypotenuse, so it actually gives us our hypotenuse. Okay, well it doesn't matter which you choose for A and B. I'm just going to go ahead and choose X for A, B for 3. Okay, and now I can plug this in. Remember, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Okay, so A squared is X squared plus B, 3 squared, equals my C, which is 5 squared. Okay, now we can start solving. So just like on number 7, where we turned 6 squared and 8 squared into their numbers, let's do the same for 3 squared and 5 squared. So what is 3 squared? 3 times 3. It's going to give me 9. Remember, x squared we can't figure out, so that just has to stay x squared plus 9 equals, what is 5 squared, or 5 times 5? 25. Okay, now we got to solve for x. But look, there's a few things we got to get rid of on this side to get x by itself. First thing we got to get rid of is this plus 9. So what is the opposite of plus 9? We got to subtract 9. So I get x squared is equal to, what is 25 minus 9? 16. Okay, and my very last step, what is the opposite of square? Remember, square root, those cancel each other out. So I get x is all by itself. What is the square root of 16? We can put this in our calculator. Remember, second. And there it is right there, x squared. So we get our little square root, 16. And that's going to give me 4. And there we go. So we know that our missing side ended up being 4. Okay, those are your notes for today.